But the focus is on the people in the groups that are trying to do something different. And I think that that's just a different news value that probably you guys all take seriously too. Because if you look at the mainstream media, I think that there's a basic tendency to think that the more important news is the decision makers, the people with power. And what you get from that, especially if you're coming politicians and companies that are laying off, is that the system doesn't work. And this is, you can really argue that. But if you're not providing some alternative to that, you just breed a lot of cynicism and turn people off from trying to do something. If you do seek out those people, and I'm sure you guys all are too, not only does it encourage other people to get involved and sort of build democracy from the ground up, but it also keeps you happy about the work. I mean, I have just been so lucky to be constantly inspired by people. I don't know if there are any.
I would love to hear questions. Like, Chris, I have a whole bunch of stuff we'd like to tell you, but I think it'd probably be more helpful if you guys could maybe, what would you like to know? What are you mulling over right now? What things might you want to share about all this?
Well, I'm starting a site in Trenton, the city of Trenton in January. I received a micro grant to start it. Well, I'm trying to figure out how best to use that money. It's only $4,000. And I'm going to be a 501c3, and I'm going to try to use some of that money to make money in terms of paying someone to write some grants for me, although that's a tough area, trying to get grant money nowadays and foundation money. But I'd just like to hear more in terms of how, making it work and how to sell sponsors on the idea of sponsoring a site in a community, in an underserved, this is a poor minority community, mostly where it has the highest murder rate it's had ever, and how do I sell people on supporting something like that? And who do I target? What diversity of resources should I try to target to get support for that?
It could be the others.
I have some things that haven't worked.
that's just.
So let me tell you about that.
That's just as helpful, I think.
Yeah, I was fortunate in that Austin Talks was started with some money from the Chicago Community Trust. Mm-hmm. So that foundation here was like what's happening in many of your communities, where NAC in particular has, strongly encouraged, if not forced, some of these foundations to consider funding this kind of thing. And so, first of all, I would definitely look for foundations like the Trenton Community Foundation or whatever it's called. Chances are they may have heard about something like this. Chances are they haven't. So then the other thing that I haven't done a very good job of, but I really need to, is there are a whole lot of other foundations in all of our communities. Obviously, a place like Chicago has a lot more than others, but there are certain things we cover. Like we've covered a lot about foreclosure, we've covered a lot about economic development and lack of jobs. And there are some foundations that you're really careful about looking at their missions, and that's what you want your grant person to do. Because in the beginning, I didn't know anything about grant writing, and I basically was doing it all on my own, and I wasted some valuable time by talking to foundations, and I've really done a little bit better research, and also asked around. It's one thing to look very carefully at their website, but then you want to quick call, like you'll see, they'll all list who they've given money to recently, and what I should have done in a couple of these cases is I should have called some of those people that I thought were kind of like what I wanted money for, to find out, because if I had, and one woman I ended up running into later, and she's like, oh yeah, I wish you'd call me, because it was clear that they were giving it to me for a different reason, and they weren't ever going to give me money again for this. So I would definitely look at what the foundation says, but then pick off of a few of those folks that you think are kind of aligned to what you want money for, and then call and ask them. A couple times I've called people and they don't really want to share, and that's fine, but then you're just where you were to begin with. You didn't know anything more before you called and they said no. The other thing I tried unsuccessfully was advertising. Although I think the thing about advertising is it's too easy for me especially, to write off this community. Because you look, if you go back and do the basic things an advertising person will tell you to do, like do a business directory, look and see, make that list of who you can sell advertising to. Okay, well, I could sell a lot of advertising to convenience marts / liquor stores. I have a lot of rent-to-own stores. I have a few grocery stores, none of them any good. I have a lot of small businesses, many of which don't have websites, but a few years ago probably would have been interested, although now the really smart small business people in my area aren't even thinking they need a website, they just want to do mobile. So what I think can work in some markets, and for me it's just been, it's me. I should have gotten some money, and I'm kind of in the hole where I should get money to hire someone to do what you're doing. So that's actually smart to think of putting your money not on the content side, but on the revenue generating side. But I bet there is a market in many of our markets for not necessarily creating a website for people, but mobile device. The number of people with smartphones in your areas is probably much higher than we think. We were talking about this during lunch. Like a lot of households in my area don't have an internet connection. So they're going to the library, they're going elsewhere to use the internet. So I don't have as many visitors to my website as I would like. But I think as I make as I change my design and I'm more mobile intensive, what I think I'm going to find is that there's going to be a much easier market to sell for advertising because so many people in my area don't have a computer, but they all have smartphones, or virtually all of them. I find very, very few people who have those Star Trek flip phones anymore. So I think that's one thing to think about from the beginning is how can you, if you're selling advertising, is there a way to not start with from the website perspective, but think of, okay, is there a way for me to just flip it and start from the mobile perspective? And then the other thing I would think about is in terms of advertising, lots of social service agencies do services in my neighborhood. And a lot of them give grant money, right? Like for low-income heating assistance, for Obamacare, right? They're probably spending all this money to get the Obamacare word out. That's a lot of money that's going to traditional advertisers. And there's no reason that you can't make a pitch in each of your markets for, look at the audience I have. I have an audience that is much more specialized and targeted than some of these people who spend a lot more money on. And then the other thing too is I didn't really want to do an email newsletter because it was one more thing I didn't have time to. But it's been much easier to sell advertising for that email newsletter.
Are you a nonprofit?
I'm a nonprofit, yeah.
Because I don't have my 501c3 status yet, of course, because I'm just starting.
Right.
Anyway, it just creates some issues with advertising.
Well, you're right. And even with a nonprofit, and I have to go back and look at those IRS rules because remember, you can only sell so, you can only make so much of your money if you're a nonprofit from advertising. So just make sure you look up all that. Honestly, so much of my money in the beginning has been from foundation and individual. That I'm nowhere near reaching that percentage for advertising, and I don't think I ever will.
So you're saying so the newsletter is a good route?
A newsletter is a really good route. And the thing about the newsletter too is like I probably should do it even more than once a week. I just do it once a week. That traffic is amazing. And it makes sense. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't go and visit the 5 websites I should every day, right? I get a slew of email. Oh, yeah, I should go look at that. And then I go, that prompts me to click on the story. Yeah, when you get it on Thursday or whenever I'm selling it. Yeah. Yeah, so I would think about that.
And there's this one, I don't even know if it's a website, BronzeCom, they do news for Bronzeville here. And I think they send out, I haven't gotten it long time, they send out a daily email collection of just links and stories that people have sent in. And they also send out ads.
Actually, I've actually tried to talk to him a few times. That guy makes a lot of money. He is so smart. It's a neighborhood just south of here called Bronzeville. And he sends an email newsletter. He has no website. He has no intentions of setting up a website. The Tribune, Chicago Tribune did a story about him just in the last year or so. And
he was having trouble because of spam filters.
Right, he was having problems with spam filters.
Because he had some old.
Right, so then he had to switch his, right, and he had to switch his, I think he's now MailChimp, but I think he has like 40,000. I mean, he has this amazing, and seriously, this is a guy who, I can't remember what he was doing, he's not a trained journalist, I can't remember what he was doing, and he doesn't even do that normal job anymore because this is his job. And so that's the other thing, like that kind of gets back to like how much time we can all spend, like, okay, what WordPress theme do I want? And all these, and that, and I'm still very website-centric myself, but he is one model. He sends out the email newsletter 5 days a week. and virtually no, I don't think it's any original content.
Right.
He has advertisers, and he does a very good job of curating and aggregating content for his readers. I mean, I envy him every day when I get that, like, God, is he smart. So, I mean, that's a way to do it too.
And there's another idea. Oh, you reading the book or?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. What I would do, and just to give you a little update, I mean, I'm the philanthropic engagement director for Plymouth Local News, so we created this role more of on a consulting basis to be able to help not-for-profits, both financially, but also in terms of how they use resource development that's familiar in that industry to help grow news. So I would actually go back and look to contact other not-for-profits in your area because they have funding. And what happens, larger grants, state grants, federal, even like the little mini ones for 4 or 5 grand, there's usually like a percentage that has to go towards marketing. And what happens, I guess, with this new indie way of life, not every not-for-profit looks at your website as being, this is a marketable organization. I can pay them to help promote this initiative for youth in Trump driving, or this is not a great opportunity right here to help against breast cancer awareness. So you'll be surprised. And some of the grants are residual, so they're 3-year grants. There's one program called the 21st Century Learning Grant. So 21st Century Learning Grant. It's given to at-risk communities, at-risk schools, but they need partners. So what happened? Thousands of schools nationwide will apply for it. Part of it is that they target a school that has a certain percentage of a reduced lunch as part of the ratio. And then what will happen is that they have to recruit other partners to be on that grant as well. You could be a partner. And then your niche is that, well, you help reach 10,000 people per month or 100,000 people per month. But the money's right there. It's right there really easy.
So the title of this breakout session was covering underserved communities. So I was interested in your ideas about what those communities might be. My neighborhood that I cover is nationally ranked in the top 5 as most ethnically diverse. More than 50% of the children in the public schools are getting free or reduced lunch. So my community is pretty integrated, and I was interested in ideas kind of outside of those traditional boxes that we like to place underserved communities in, poor or ethnic, and are there other underserved communities and ideas about coverage in a suburban community like mine that you guys might have that we should be, thinking about?
What stories do you think aren't getting covered?
I don't really know. I mean, I focus on community news, so it's kind of hard to know that's why I'm here.
Well, a lot of what I do in terms of our coverage, and this would be coverage that could be applied to any community, whether it's undercover, I think those are kind of code words sometimes for people, like, oh, that's a largely minority community. And in my case, that does happen to be true. But underserved and undercovered is actually true, sometimes even in wealthier, more ethnically diverse communities. But I think what it comes down to is just your mindset about what you cover, right? Like what the Trib and Sun Times are going to cover here and the 4 TV stations in this market is going to be somewhat similar. I mean, we all cover like education, right? But the way I cover it is different than the way they cover it. They are never going to come in and write individual stories about the 4 schools that closed as part of the 50 schools that were closing this past year. No one was ever going to come in and do those stories, which is why our stories got picked up by a lot of people and were mentioned on the TV news in part, because we were able to come in and do that stuff that no one else is going to do. So some of it's just very basic, like what do I have a monopoly on that no one else is going to bother to come in and do?
So in some ways we might be just covering those underserved communities, period, by doing what we do.
Right, and I look very carefully. I spend way more time than I probably should reading and listening and watching the news. And basically, I want to know what the landscape is, but then I'm always looking for ways to localize some of those stories. Like, I was never going to do the story about, we were never going to go do an interview with the head of the Chicago Teachers Union. Not that I don't think she's an interesting person, but there's no reason for me for any of us to go talk to her from Austin Talks. But what was missing was the fact that what was happening at those 4 schools that were going to be closed. And before they announced those 4 schools, there were actually 7 schools that were on the list. So we did a story on each of those, right? What would be lost, what these people thought, really giving a voice, going back to what Chris was saying, like, hearing from the people that no one else hears from, right? Like, and what I did do is I would link to a press release from both the CPS, CEO, as well as the head of the teachers union, because you want that to be part of your report. But the value of what we do day in, day out, and on that story was producing the news that no one else was going to produce, which is why pretty quickly we've become a source for other media outlets. Like the Chicago Tribune just did a huge story in last Sunday's paper, front page. Although the funny thing is that most of my readers don't get the Trib in paper form, so they didn't even know it was page one. They knew it was a long story when I put it on the website. But that story, I was one of the first people those investigative reporters called, in part because they know me because of my investigative work, but more importantly, they call me because of Austin Talks. And I was the one, like, they quoted several people in that story, and 3 of those people they found for me. So Austin Talks wasn't mentioned in that story, and that's fine. But, like, that was also my job, was, like, what is it about the community? What are the issues when someone, and that's a great thing, and I'm guessing that may already happen with you, where you're this resource for the outside people, whether it's the media or I've had foundations call me and ask me questions about, and unfortunately none of them want to fund what I'm doing, but they found my source, me as a useful source, and then they're wanting to figure out how to get to people that I mentioned on the website. So I think some of it's just at a very basic level, just doing information that no one else is doing. And I think even if you have, like, I have some weekly newspapers in my market, and I'm very careful. I watch what they do, and they watch what I do. In fact, we have a collaboration with the Dominant Weekly, and that's where most of our revenue comes in, more than advertising. They pay to run our stories in their print edition, which is fabulous for me because I still have a lot of readers who aren't going to be reading it online, and so they can pick up the Austin Weekly News. We get the byline. I don't know how many people. It'd be interesting to do a survey to see how many people ever actually differentiate between, oh, that was an Austin Talks story, or if they just think it's Austin Weekly News. But I'll even do, every week or two, I'll touch base with the editor of that paper. Are you covering this? Are you covering that? So that we don't cover the same thing. We didn't do that this last week, so we both went to an event on Monday, although it's such a big event that we probably both should have been there for different reasons. But that has been another way for me to figure out what should I be covering as an undercover community. And then part of it too is I run a fair amount of stuff in the community, and I was a traditionally trained journalist, worked for daily newspapers and in the TV world for about 20 years before I did this. And so I had to really kind of get my head around, okay, I'm going to run this piece, even though it's not written the way I want it to be written, and it's not really fully reported. I mean, I'm just very careful about when I label things. But that's actually, and a lot of mainstream newspapers are now starting to get into this idea of citizen journalism and that kind of thing. But I think that plays a role too. Like, I won't cover, there's no way I can cover everything, with a bunch of freelancers and students. And so I have to also be open to having this uncovered stuff come from other people too. And then just
do you think that might confuse your readers though? Because I look at Sacramento Press that was built on that platform where you had journalists reporting and citizen journalists, and which could be a PR person, and that's probably a different format than what you're doing. But it sounds like now they've had a hard time connecting to their readership, and I wonder if that different type of content, although it might have.
I mean, like when the alderman submits something, she has a byline, and in fact, she didn't come off well in this story. And so we ran, we did an aggregated post and then linked to the Tribune story, and then she put out a press release, which we, then put out and said, this is, Alderman in italics, this is the response the Alderman had. It was written, and then she signs at the end. I think in that case it's pretty clear to readers, but you do have to think about how you do it, because in the beginning, I was thinking old school newsroom, like, okay, the stuff we produce, I will click on the box as news. And then so it says news at the top. But the stuff that's in the community, no one got that. No one understood that.
That's insider.
So that's where I had to go back, oh, okay, so I need to be very clear about the byline, and then sometimes we'll even put something at the top and the bottom of the post. And, I do it in such a way, like, I don't, like, this is what's good our stuff, it's different. Just so they know, so there's no question that.
The source.
Yeah. And I do think people can tell, like, our stories are multi-source, you can't really tell how we personally feel about things, and then the stuff that, the hospital sends us is, yay, we're so great, Now, I will occasionally then do stories, like, I'll think, oh, we need to go back and get the other side to that, and then we'll go back and do that, and then we'll link back to the original post. And sometimes they're happy about that, sometimes they aren't, which has also affected advertising. We are the first news entity really, including our partner, we do more serious investigative type of stuff, not all the time, but we hold, our big thing is, informing the population, having them have a voice in things, and calling things as we see them. And so the alderman doesn't like when we write about the tip money, how little bit went to this area. They don't like it, the school board, the principals don't like it when we point out a couple things about their school, which they would rather not have people know about. So I think it has hurt us on the advertising front, but.
I'm from San Jose, California, and I have a site called McBride SJ. And it started actually with a group of residents who wanted to connect to each other in City Hall.
Yeah.
And then I was helping them out, and then I got a grant for New Voices, so turned it into.
I was a New Voices grantee way back when. That's great.
You're more successful than.
Well, I think by the time you were probably had to beat out a lot more people than I did to get your New Voices grant. So that's a very competitive grant.
It's true, very. Anyway, so I helped them, and then I got a grant, and I turned it into journalism, which I sort of lost the people that were really into it.
Yeah.
But of course, it became a better site. But I guess I have kind of a different that I've heard since I've been here is what I'm trying to do is sort of unite all these neighborhoods. So I don't cover just one neighborhood. San Jose has probably 144 neighborhoods associations, and so there's such a wealth of information. And you have websites that I link to. So it's. I mean, do you have any experience in sort of? I want my site to be a portal for if you want to know neighborhood news.
Yeah.
I'm here. I cover City Hall with through the lens of neighborhoods. So.
But not one neighborhood in particular.
No.
I have really not felt comfortable asking for money.
I don't either.
And we have to get over that because I need to in my area because that's where I'm going to get. That's going to be my next round of funding, and I think it's far more sustainable, quite frankly, than foundation support. And I'm going to write 2 letters. One's going to be for a rather large group of friends and acquaintances and family who, you know what, they get lots of tax deductions, every year. Why not give it to me? And the worst it's going to. I'm going to have to think about how to write that letter. But then the other letter I want to write to people I don't know at all, but I've come in contact with through the site. Then I'm going to talk about a couple of instances that happened. Because of Awesome Talks, 7 teens have been able to go to this amazing overnight camp, week-long camp, and 3 of them now are going to go back and try to be camp counselors at this camp. They have 3 of them have never left the state of Illinois. They've been able to go to this overnight camp because this camp found out about the work we were doing, called Awesome Talks, and we'd like to give some of these camperships because we're trying to get our numbers up with inner city kids, and these kids were able to go to this camp for 2 years running. So that I'm thinking of those, think of those things, and that's what goes in a fundraising letter, right? And you don't need to have 8 things, just tell 1 or 2 of those stories, and then you ask for money, and then you follow up with a phone call. And now is the time to do it because if you guys are like me, I didn't give very much yet, and I'm looking at my taxes and I'm thinking, I better do it. And then I'm one of these people who December 29th is writing checks or going online to charge my donations. And I think there's a lot of people like that. So I think that's absolutely something to capitalize on.
And I would use this time period now, put it up right before, because everyone wants to donate right before the end of the year to get that tax credit. So right now, whatever way you can convey that story, and also get the data behind it, because now the way the grants are going, you need to have that hard data. 10 years ago, you can say, well, we help the community, and then you get a check.
Now it's anecdote, you need.
So now you need both, So.
Yeah. Absolutely. What else? What are you guys interested in knowing or sharing? Because
my situation is that I run a site.
Sure, your name tag.
There
you go.
I'm from the lowdown in New York City on the Lower East Side, which is a very mixed community, both ethnically and income-wise. And so one of the things that, for instance, we have a lot of big nonprofits in the neighborhood, maybe more than any other community on earth, which is a sort of a holdover from the turn of the last century. And they are very focused on us because they see us as a way to tell their stories to the gentrified part of our community. And we've built up a lot of goodwill in ethnic communities. The 2 main ethnic communities, Puerto Rican and Dominican and Chinese, and there's a constant call for us to do more of the stories in those communities, and we just can't do them all.
Yeah.
And so I think that we could get a lot more support from those nonprofits, but I'm very reluctant because probably like anywhere, but especially in New York, the nonprofits have sort of an unholy alliance with the political establishment, and so I'm wary of getting too close to them.
Do they produce do any of them try to produce content for you? Like submit things?
Well, they do submit things, and we don't run their content on Filter, for sure. And they're all these are all multi-million-dollar nonprofits who are basically all at war with each other for the same government funding.
Yeah, they all want that shrinking pie.
Right.
What niche are they? Are they all just like different?
They're mostly social service, 100-year-old settlement houses, and providing all kinds of human services in the neighborhood. Because as the neighborhood is 35% Latino and 40% Chinese, and predominantly low income, and then there's this 20% slice of the neighborhood is very affluent. So it creates conversation.
What's the relationship between the two sites and the college?
Okay, well, we actually have a pretty nice deal. The college is our fiscal agent, so we've never gone through. Early on, we explored that, and that was just with Chicago Talks, which was launched 6 years ago. And that was just as all this was starting to get hard to apply. And our bureaucracy is pretty light. So basically, the grants have come in and they have their own grant line, and we, the two professors, me and another colleague who run these two sites, we basically just have the funding and try to have another line coming in, right? So that basically we're not relying on anything from the college. That said, we would not still be running probably right now, at least not publishing the amount that we're publishing either of those sites if we didn't have the in-kind and direct support from the college. Because what we do get is we get a graduate student every semester for both sites. And that is money that doesn't come from our budget, right? So that comes from the college. And then we get someone during the summer for each of the sites. And then I've been fortunate that I've had a couple of work-study eligible graduate students who, and that doesn't even come from the college per se, that comes from the government, but that's part of the financial aid package. So that they work however many hours and then they get paid, but that doesn't come from my budget.
And so you were on faculty here.
I still am.
You still are, so you launched this from a faculty position.
Exactly, right, in fact, right. And so I'm very lucky because I have a full-time tenured position here. And this is just something that I think is central to my work, but I kind of do on the side. Okay. So I teach and I help run our department and I do some other things, and that's a luxury. It's a blessing and a curse because I'm not forced in the way that a lot of you guys are. That oh my God, I have to make my mortgage. Yes, I have to make my mortgage payment, but it's not dependent on me going out and selling 18 ads. But I think if it was, the site would be even more robust and it would be better. So. And that's where I think the college model, that may not work for everyone. It works for me because I was the creator and I happen to be here, right? But I could see in a different setting where if a college is trying to tell me what to do with the site or trying to exercise editorial involvement or anything like that, that would not be, from my perspective, a good thing. But I do think that there are other colleges and universities that are now, I think there's some pressure, not enough in my opinion, for journalism schools across the country to actually use this teaching hospital model. And I went to a journalism school way back when. Great college university experience, but I didn't learn anything from professors because virtually none of them had any experience in working in the newsroom. So what I learned was all in the student daily, half of it was wrong, which I realized in the first couple of jobs, but that's just how I learned. But I think there are a lot of college universities that have at least a few people on faculty now, or have the pressure to have people on faculty now, who actually are like you guys who are doing work like this. And then there's also pressure more so than ever from parents who are like, are you going to get a job? You need to have something in a portfolio, show that you've actually done work, and this is real work. Like the students who do work for our site, I mean, they get heavily edited in some cases. Other cases, they don't have to be edited hardly at all because they're really good. And they've taken so many classes. Now they're working with us. They're getting this real work experience. I mean, I've had students go to NPR from working with me. A couple have done New York Times internships. Several of them are working at the Sun-Times and the Trib now. I mean, these are people in their mid-20s. So, and they may have done okay anyway, but I think the experience they get from this is really good, and I think that there's an opportunity hopefully for each of you in your places, like is there someone in a college or university? And that can be something as small as, hey, I have a class, I want them to get work published, they need to have an audience, can we publish with you? To maybe embed it into curriculum, that maybe you can be an adjunct at that place and teach a community news class.
That's my goal. I'm trying to do that, but I haven't had a good luck. This is San Jose State University, a journalism department. But so if you have, and I could talk offline about this, but a model that I could do something and present it to them and say, hey,
I can have.
I had some interns for a while, but that was just something I did on my own.
And that's something that I would do, because if you already worked with interns, but that should tell a faculty member who's making a decision about this, like, oh, that person actually has already done the hard work. And have you guys all had interns before? And they've been sometimes good, sometimes not so good?
Yeah. All
over the map, right?
Yes.
And well, in my experience working in a newsroom and hiring people, I kind of had that same experience. I think with that, it really gets back to the conversations you can have with, and being very clear with the faculty members or the internship coordinator, whoever's placing the person. These are the duties, this is what I'm looking for, and then insisting that you get to talk to that student before they place. Because, not always, but I think you are going to get a pretty good sense even with the phoner, about, this could be a lot of work. Because that's probably the last thing you guys need. I mean, I know it's good for journalism and democracy if you're working with students, but you don't have a lot of luxury of all these other people that are doing the work while you're working one-on-one with this kid.
But I thought they might be better than going to citizen journalism around and trying to train neighborhood leaders to be journalists, which I've done a little bit of too. But
I think either can work well and either can work horribly. I mean, I think I haven't found the magic sauce on that one.
And they're probably both ending.
yeah.
What else? I think we just have a few more minutes. What are questions or thoughts? I'd love to hear what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
You can send your ideas.
Well, I'm really don't have a lot to contribute. I'm just getting started. I've got
Where are you?
in St. Louis area.
Oh, that's right.
In St. Louis. In St. Louis County, there's lots of smaller municipalities. I'm planning on covering 2 of them, but just to the south, there's one an area that is pretty diverse ethnically, a lot of Bosnians and other communities, and they're kind of their own little community.
Yeah.
And I've working for Patch, I've done stories that I know that they would be interested in.
Yeah.
And then there's an online Bosnian publication, which is in English actually, and they just copy and paste my articles right in. At the very bottom they say, this is from here.
So they link back to you though?
Yes, they link back.
Do you think that they'd be interested in paying for some content? I mean, I always think about that because I never thought in a million years like this weekly newspaper that I mean, they don't have a lot of money, but they were paying freelancers. They figured, well, you're editing it, it's saving us time. We like the stories you're doing. So I don't know. I always think of that as a possibility. I've become better about trying to look for money. Yeah. And I mean, it's not, you're not going to be AP, you're not going to make a ton of money because it's not like you can sell to 8 different markets, but there are people in that market who want it. And the other thing, I haven't done this yet, but I've heard this from other people. If the chambers of commerce and groups like that, business groups, they will often have sometimes sophisticated email newsletters on their own, or the old-fashioned newsletter, print newsletter that goes out every quarter or something, and they'll pay people, to do that material either in-house or out-of-house, and maybe some of the stuff you're doing, they'll use and credit you and pay you. So. Open you guys up for that. I think that's a possible source. Randy, are we out of time?
Oh, another 5 minutes. If you have one more question.
I'm curious, can you just go around the room real quickly and see where everyone's from? I think I've caught everyone.
Red Minor, St. Louis.
St. Louis, okay.
Go to the beginning.
Yeah. San Jose,
San
California.
Jose, okay.
New York City.
New York,
I'm doing so ready to show them.
New Hampshire.
Sacramento.
Yeah, I think the funny part of this whole thing is that, to get the coverage right, it's tough to get advertising. I know it's not an advertising medium, but, trying to find creative ways to get the money
Yeah.
to continue to do the work. And I just have so many people who, we talked about it earlier, these passionate people, how do you get these passionate people to help rally behind what you're doing is provide a voice.
Yeah.
So there's a way to do it. You just got to look at it from a little different angle.
Yeah.
So,
And I think you have to ask for help, whether it's money or otherwise.
yeah.
And I have not been good at all about doing that.
Yeah.
But I think, okay, but if I do it and they say no, I'm where I was anyway. I still think it's worth the effort.
Have you worked at all with advertising students to have them sell ads?
It's a great, actually, we have an advertising department here, and I have an appointment next week to go talk to
I'm
them.
wondering if that,
Yeah.
if they're
Yeah.
at all interested
The
in
one
that, because-
hesitation has been, in this market, the students here can work for firms and do work in the South Loop and in the downtown Chicago area, which is very sexy and exciting and easier than schlepping out to this neighborhood that most of them don't know about and might be a little scared to go into. So that's the one. But I still think it's a good, I think it's, and it honestly, I think it's a good pitch to make to students. Do you want to really be versatile? Do you want to be able to sell ads in all markets? I mean, if you can sell ads in my market, anyone will hire you, right?
Yeah.
So that's the pitch I'm going to practice and keep taking.
And also, we all have probably local elections coming up. Does anybody sold political ads or
I do.
have a problem with political ads or?
Yeah. How did that work?
It's actually, I approached them this last school board election. I pretty much only focus on the school board, and that's every 2 years. This last school board election, I reached out to all of the known candidates. I shared my rate card and told them pretty much only rule with their advertisement that had to disclose that it was a paid advertisement on the actual art. So I didn't want there to be any confusion because I assumed that not everybody would advertise, and I think I got 3 or 4 out of the 9 candidates, which was a lot for a single school board race. I also do pretty intensive coverage in that I ask for reader questions, and then I give those questions verbatim. I kind of space them out by what they are to all of the candidates, and I give them a word count. And I think this last time it was pretty short, like maybe 150. I mean, I've done it longer, but especially with 9 candidates.
Yeah.
So I give them a word count, I give them a deadline. If they miss the deadline, they don't get published at all. So far, nobody's figured out that they could probably just post their answer in the comments. And I publish them in the order that they're received, because I initially did it by alphabetical order, and then somebody said do it by the order on the ballot, and I'm just to be as fair as possible so there's no issues. And I kind of just sent that all at the same time. This is what I'm going to be doing. I'll be getting questions. Respond if you want to participate in the questions. Let me know if you want to do advertising. And I made the most this last election. I anticipate the next election is going to be pretty competitive.
That's great, like the election pages and had students interview candidates and all that, but I've never sold ads that way. I just didn't know how you sort of separated them, or how you make sure that people know this is.
It has to say that it's a paid political by who it's paid by, because it might not actually be that candidate. It might be another group or something, or even just words paid advertisement. And with Broad Street, it's going to rotate automatically instead of me doing it by myself manually every day. So it has equal play depending on the placement. And everybody chose the same size and the same placement pretty much. So that made it a little bit easier for me. But there was only one reader who raised the question about having them advertise and saying that I had to disclose that, and I responded to him, and I copied every candidate, and I explained everything that I did, and I said all these candidates have my direct phone number, and they know how to reach me if they feel there's any issue with fairness, and that shut them up immediately.
But what if an editor's note or something, it's like, or not as fair, but transparency sort of thing that.
I mean, do we disclose when the edible arrangements advertises? I mean, You know, if you get listeria from them, I mean, is it my fault because I ran the ad? You know what I mean? It's just like I think as long as it's clear that it's an advertisement, I never endorse candidates. So that is also, I mean, and that's all also in that initial contact. And I will never endorse a candidate. In my community, it serves no purpose. It will not benefit me. It will not benefit my readers. I have to work with whoever's elected. I mean, I guess if it got to a point where I really thought it would make a difference on who I supported, you know, so I don't publicly endorse anybody and encourage people to read the stories and go to the forums. I cover the forums. I try to videotape them. That's kind of hard because I don't really have the money for technology. But I think if you're doing everything even keel, you really don't have to explain yourself. And if you're already doing that, your work stands, you know, kind of your reputation stands for itself in that sense.
We do endorsements either, but I started to have second thoughts about it this year because the candidates were definitely more focused on publications that were doing endorsements because they wanted those endorsements so badly. And
So
there
was
was,
it affecting access? You think like you were getting
we
people?
were getting access, but there was more sort of the candidates themselves, I think, that were, it's not as if they wouldn't talk to us, but the spotlight was on the publications and it shows it to the endorsements.
I think we did a political only section, from the local politics, and it was targeted to go after, you know, I mean, we have an election every year, and where we're located is a purple state. I mean, it's interesting to say that much. But we had one incident when there was something very, trying to say the right way. It was something that was definitely questionable in terms of politics and in terms of using local debate. Long story short, the logo. So the local government didn't properly vet a logo that was going to represent the entire region. And they, ironically, it was supposed to be promoting economic development, but the company that did the logo was a path across the country. It was kind of funny. You know, we're trying to provide, you know, support that way. So long story short, that company had contacted us to pay for advertising because it knew that company that was halfway across the country was being dragged through the mud, not because it did anything incorrectly, it's because they just so happened to be located in the West Coast. So but they actually paid for advertising. And then that left one question. Well, do you take that money because they are the news right now? They're clearly trying to buy advertising to make it seem like they're trying to get back to the community. So all we really did was kind of have a separate hand deal with the money transaction and not the publisher. Somebody who was not the actual writer, but it's a separate, non-bipartisan, you know, I just bought the money. And that's pretty much it. He was basically trying to buy his way into, you know.
And that was a big story that you all broke too, right? About that logo. So, and I think we need to.
Okay. Great. Anything? Any last words?
Ripper.
Go for it.